Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's Nicholas Davenport, CEO and founder of Mind Body One, and I bring you the first episode of our video newsletter, Industry Pathology. And just like the name suggests, we're looking at the root causes of what's going on in the mental performance industry. Now, how do we even get here? So I saw a student's post a few weeks ago talking about what can they do as they approach graduation, whether it be internships, organizational work, starting a business, staying in the non-clinical route, or maybe going the clinical route. So these questions I've heard numerous times over the last decade being in this field. And I find myself either answering them on posts like that, which I responded to this young lady, or they're messaging me, or I'm just talking to them in the field. And I get the same types of questions. And that's said to me, we need to do something about this. Now, I'm not saying that industry is getting a little away from the main source of what we call sports psychology, or now I would say performance psychology. But if you look at how we got here, people like Coleman Griffith, the father of modern sports psychology, he had a multifaceted approach, which I at Mind Body One implement to the fullest degree. But I think we veered so far away from that. And sometimes change is needed. And that's the overall theme in this episode. Because if you look at just human history, once upon a time, we would walk around hunting and gathering food, trying to find the best locations to find these animals or find these fruits or berries or vegetables. And then we would migrate to another location and we end up all across the area going miles and miles a day, sometimes up to 10 miles a day. Now, that wasn't that efficient because guess what? You're exerting a lot of energy, but you're not getting a lot back. And that's kind of what the industry is right now. You got people going to colleges, 2-year degree programs for masters and maybe 3 to 5 for a PhD. And they're coming out with all types of knowledge, different type of mentorship to guide them, research even. But where do you go next? And that's the problem. The same question that the young lady proposed of what do I do next? I'm kind of confused of people spending tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for an education just to not be guided to what to do next and then have all this debt. Because at the end of the day, we have to survive. And if our means of surviving is in the mental performance industry, we need to use that skill set that we paid for and learn to get us to be able to live day to day, right? I don't want you working at a odd job or something completely out of your field just to make ends meet when you have this degree that for me has been great, not just for money wise, but just experience. And I love what I do. I wake up every morning wanting to do whatever it is, whether it's working with workshops with an organization, whether it's doing one-on-one clients, creating my apps, the list goes on. I want that for everyone in this industry. But guess what? There's a path you have to take. And it's not that easy. Usually the easiest path is not what's going to get you to where you want to be. And we talk to our clients all the time in a way of they need to overcome adversity, such and such. But are we doing that ourselves as practitioners? Now, let's look at some of the pitfalls I've seen. Now, going back to that analogy, when I say we're hunters and gatherers, now we're in civilizations where we grow our food in farms, we have meat factories. So we kind of brought the hunting and gathering to one place and now it ends up in like a grocery store or supermarket. So therefore, it may not be the same, but we get the same end result without expending all the energy. And that's just like going to college for these degrees and getting all this accumulated debt and not being able to utilize what you need. That's the same thing where we are, because if we did not as a civilization get to that point, humans wouldn't exist right now. So I'm going to go through 5 different pitfalls I see people making that might speak to how we can change that dynamic and work on it, because I don't want to just give criticism without an actual solution. Now, the first one we're going to call academic paralysis. Now, this just means that we rely too heavily on the need to cite studies or lean on credentials to either make a lane for ourselves or to solidify that we know what we're talking about to either the layperson or another colleague. I've had students that I've mentored debate with me on topics as straightforward as if an athlete is put into different sports, they're probably going to have a more well-rounded adjustment, not just physically because they're not overusing their body, but even socially and discipline-wise because different sports require different types of personality traits, different types of modalities to train. But they kept citing studies, and granted, it's great if a study can back that up, but there's some things that are just common sense. And that's not to discredit the study or discredit the person telling me that. But the point is, when you get caught up into that, when you're talking to everyday people who just want to perform better, you're pushing them away. And that's a narrative that's been pushed so much that we forget how to talk to people in this industry. Because a lot of times in sports psychology, we talk about cultural diversity, gender diversity. But one thing I don't think we touch on enough in this field is the diversity between professionals, the people we work with, and then the levels of that. Because if you've never been an elite level athlete, there's a diversity issue right there. You probably won't be able to talk to them as efficiently. Or if you haven't worked with elite level athletes, you won't be able to talk to them as efficiently, or vice versa. If you only work with higher level, maybe that diversity to the higher level won't really be effective with the lower level. You have to be kind of bilingual, trilingual, or just fluent in language when it comes to speaking to these different type of performance or athlete professionals. Because if this is the case, if we're always going the academic route, we're going to push them away because a lot of people don't want to be talked down to. They want to learn, but they don't want to be taught. I know that doesn't sound like it makes sense, but what I'm getting at is you need to educate them in a way where it meets them where they're at, but doesn't come off as you kind of condescending or coming off too jargony where they just get lost in the mix. Or if they do get it, it's like, okay, I get it. You don't have to talk to me that way. So you need to find out that medium, because if you go too academic in a way that it's, oh, you need to listen to me because I'm the professional, it's not the best look. Now, the next one I'm going to call therapist tunnel vision. This is because in this industry, the one-on-one consults is probably king. Almost everyone who gets this degree, their first step into their career, whether it be working at an internship, whether it be doing their own practice or getting a job at an organization, is sitting down one-on-one with a client. And that's great. But if you're just doing that or thinking that's the only route, you're already limiting your perspectives. You got to think a little bit outside the box. Now, is it the lowest hanging fruit? Yes, because people understand, hey, I have an issue, let's talk about it. But sometimes people get too obsessed with talking. Once again, I've mentored dozens of interns, and I've had people who want to do sessions and that's all they want to do. They don't want to do any of the back end work. They don't want to think of creative ways to get engagement, because sometimes that is not going to reach a person. Some people don't want to be sitting down and talking. I had numerous athletes of all levels tell me this. And I work with so many populations. I like to hear their feedback. And I think that's another issue that goes into this is we're so caught up in that we love this field and we understand the dynamics of it. We forget that they don't. They don't love this. You do. Now you need to make them understand what they need. At the end of the day, you're teaching them. You're letting them be able to be guided by you. Sometimes they need to get what they need, but not what they want from you. And sometimes we forget that because we want to appease the client. And that's something that could be a different episode within itself, because I have background in the clinical field from doing coursework to be a clinical psychologist. So that's a different topic, but it definitely can be limiting your vision. Now, this third one, this is probably the biggest when I talk about getting out of college and not knowing what to do. Not having a business mindset. Now, it doesn't mean that you have like an MBA level of knowledge, because honestly, business is best learned through experience. I don't have an MBA. I've never taken a business class, but I've read a lot about business, marketing, branding, and all types of strategies. And then I've trial and error of investing in things that didn't go to much, hundreds or even thousands of dollars. And then I've done things that have grown my business that made me say, hey, I need to do more of this. So understanding that business is more than just getting an LLC and then saying, hey, I need to get clients. You want to work with me? Because that one-to-one business to client model, once again, it's the lowest hanging fruit, but do you know how to market it? Do you know how to retain clients? Because you can look at it as, okay, we did 5 sessions, they feel good, and now they're gone. And you're like, just good riddance. I'm done with you. Best of luck. No, you need to keep those clients there to some degree. Now, does it mean you need to keep doing once a week? Maybe do once a month, or maybe have a course that he can have enrichment where it takes them like another 5 weeks to refresh them on what they just learned. So they still get some work from you, but it's not as hands-on and it's even more affordable for them. The more streams of revenue you can bring in, the better. If you're limited just to booking one-on-one sessions, even if you were to get a lot of clients, there's only so much hours in a day. If you reduce 6, 7, 8 hours of clients, that adds up. And then from a mental standpoint, do you have the capacity for that? A lot of times, even though from an hours standpoint we do, but not from an actual emotional well-being, because that's a lot to take on if you're only doing the consults. Now me, my practice is mixed up with consults, workshops. We have technology we use. I have a team of people that do more performance-based stuff. So it can look a lot of different ways, and that's diverse for many reasons, not just from the business side, but what we can offer the client. And the name of the game is, well, how do you best accommodate the person you need to work with? They all can't be getting the same type of implementation of services, and this is something you need to understand. And that's where having those business models is important. Now, this next one I'm going to call identity confusion. This kind of plays off the business model in a sense, but it goes beyond just business and making money. It's, what is your identity? Who are you? Are you a scientist? Are you a counselor? Are you a coach? Are you a motivator? Whatever it may be, you need to understand how is your personality best fit your services and style. Because a lot of times people get so caught up in what they learned or who they were mentored by, they kind of adopt that. I did that. Whoever teaches you, usually we model ourselves. Like you talk about Bandura social modeling, you probably learned about that. But basically, we have to be able to develop our own identity. Outside of this, Nicholas Davenport, that's my name. People know me as Mr. Mental Muscle. That's my brand. And what do you get from Mr. Mental Muscle? You get a very diverse, multidisciplinary approach to get your mind right. That means it could be cognitive training. It could be our applied mindset training where you do drills and I can give you a coaching session right through that versus me sitting down one-on-one. But if you do need that, we can do that as well. So what is your identity? Are you a very creative person, artistic? That needs to show in your practice or your methods. Are you a former Division I athlete? That definitely needs to show in your brand because now you can leverage your ability to understand and empathize with them because they've been there and so have you. Have you been a coach at the youth level? If you're working with kids, that's going to help. So whatever your brand or brands are, they need to be exemplified in your social media. They need to be shown in your day-to-day, how you talk. When I talk to you, I need to understand what he or she is about. That's what I should take from interacting with you or your branding images and pages, because that's another topic. Social media is king these days, and I see a lot of lack of that. So we need to know what you identify as far as what type of coach, performer, or person you can just be helpful for. And this last pitfall I'm going to talk about, and this is probably very, very important in my business, and it can't happen in my business, is the fear of innovation. So there's technology, there's methods that may seem unorthodox. There might be something or a topic that's taboo. I saw a post on LinkedIn where a guy called out a whole topic where everyone was mad when he posted it, but it started a conversation. I won't get into what it was, but are you afraid to innovate? It doesn't mean you have to reinvent the wheel. For example, on one of my apps, I made a task called the double Stroop. If you're familiar with the Stroop effect, it's when the color is incongruent with the word. It works on interference. So you have to negate what you see and read and go off what the color is. I made a different version of that. Now, guess what? It wasn't that out the box, but it was different and it works on different types of skills beyond just interference. It also works on cognitive flexibility. So it added more to it. And guess what? It didn't take much. It's based off of my understanding. So when you go through the pitfalls don't mean don't do them. It just means don't let them be your downfall or your demise. Everything I just mentioned, I utilize to some degree. It's just you need to know how to plug it in and mix and match it because it's not always going to be the same thing. And this diverse, like I said, that diversity of thought is the most important thing we can do when it comes to serving our populations. Outside of technology, what about industries? Almost everyone who wants to intern with me, I have different clientele I work with: police, military, athletes, corporations, cities. Almost all of them say, I want to work with the athletes. I give them a choice. I say, who do you want to work with? Now, do they all get to work with them? No. But I'll ask them, and the first one they want to go to is athletes. I don't know if it's because that's what the industry mainly came from, sports psychology, or maybe because they're more comfortable, because they were former athletes, or they just work with athletes primarily in their programs. I don't know. But the point is, every opportunity you have to work with a different demographic is going to get you that much closer to your potential job, potential client, potential business. Because if you only have that one-track mind of this population, you don't have the ability to take from others to apply it to where it's needed. This is called analogical thinking. This is when you're able to take what you understand from different concepts, just like an analogy. You take one type of concept and mix it with another, and you put them together, and it makes sense. And that same thing with analogical thinking. How do you solve a problem? If I'm working on a tactical team who they have to go into the real world and do things that could be life or death, is it wrong to think that the dynamics I've seen in a team sport won't carry over to that? Or vice versa, that tactical team can give me some insight on how I could work with a team sport. The stakes are way different, but the outcomes are really, we need to work together harmoniously. Everyone needs to do their job and it has to be implemented in a specific way where it's integral on how this team succeeds. In some cases, losing a championship or losing much more. So being diverse in that, and a lot of people are afraid to innovate in that manner. Or like I previously mentioned with the business side, are they able to step outside the box on how to implement what they offer service-wise? Do you do courses? Do you do 1-hour consults just to give you an overview of how to do better as a coach for a team versus just talking to the individual athlete themselves? Maybe you can help the coach understand better. And I've done this before by helping the coach. It then helps the athletes. Now, if they need direct one-to-one, that might be something you talk about. But thinking outside the box is the main takeaway. It doesn't mean just do stuff for the sake of doing it, but having insight that maybe this way isn't the only way. Now, talking about all these different aspects of what we need to change is just a taste session of what's to come. This episode was meant to open the eyes of maybe I can do something a little bit different. Maybe I can apply some of these things to my practice. If I'm still in school, where could I go next with this? So this is not the end all be all for sure. There'll be much more. And like with anything, like working with our clients, we have criticisms, we have comments, but we need to find these solutions. So if I was to give it a diagnosis, I would call it chronic education misalignment and innovation avoidance. Simply put, don't be so caught up on what you learned and lose sight of what you can do. You need to be able to think clearly, apply what makes sense, but make it digestible and practical for those who need to get it. That's my pathology.